Now, he worked with some interesting leading ladies, including Joan Crawford, Lana Turner, Shelley Winters here. Do you know of any of the, some of the, any feelings we have? No, nothing untoward here. He's working with, I love the scene of Humoresque when he plays the violin, and that famous scene of Joan Crawford just getting all hot and bothered watching him play Flight of the Bumblebee,
That's so great.
I know.
Actually, Joan Crawford was really a strange person. As you all know, she was very weird. Because I'll never forget this. My mother told me that when they had this one really hot scene, which in those days was considered very hot, when they went down to the beach and they took off their clothes, they had bathing suits on. And that was the day that Joan Crawford had her kids brought to the set. and I mean, what a strange thing to do to your kids, to bring them on that day. And they came dressed in the Mary Janes and the white gloves and the whole thing. And they had to watch this, extremely racy scene for that time. I think he thought she was rather weird, and she complained about working with him.
Really?
Yeah, she said, "Tell him to stop looking at me in the eye."
What?
Because my father, he was a method actor, so he connected. So much of what his work was about was connecting with the other person. And before that, movie stars just connected with the camera, So she complained. She said, "Tell him to stop looking at me like that." But then later on, I think she enjoyed it.
Yeah.
She began enjoying, and I felt that it was one of her best performances.
Yes, a great performance.
I don't think he had affairs with all of his leading ladies, but he had affairs with a lot of women. But of course, all of them did. He wasn't any different than anybody else in terms of all the movie stars had women throwing themselves. And I'm sure that the female women had men throwing themselves at them, but they never were allowed to talk about that.
Yeah.
It was that double standard thing.
Well, do you have a couple of favorite roles of his, right? I mean,
Body and Soul.
Body and Soul?
Yeah. Body and Soul because of the character development, because of the arc, because he goes through a complete change. He ages, he goes from being an innocent, naive boy to a sophisticated man who has to make a decision of whether he's going to sell his soul to the devil or not.
And he made that with Abraham Polonsky, and that was when his contract with Warner's expired. He started his own production company,
Right.
And he did Force of Evil and Body and Soul.
You know your stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And two classics, two masterpieces, I think. But did this cause some intimidation on other people's part, you think?
Yeah, and when the Blacklist, my mother always told this story, and I was never able to get it down on paper, but she always said it to me. They were interested. HUAC was interested in finding one Jewish scapegoat movie star. That's what they wanted, and they had a choice between three liberal movie stars. One was Edward G. Robinson, the other one was Danny Kaye, and the other one was Julie, my father. And they took Julie because he was no longer signed to I'm sorry, I should explain this to you. My father was known as Julie. People who knew him called him Julie.
His name is Julius Garfield.
They didn't call him John, they called him Julie. So they said, take Garfield, you can have him. Because they were very threatened by the fact that he had started his own production company.
He famously would not name names.
Yeah, there's a thing that Lillian Hellman gets credit for. When she testified, she made a deal with these congressmen, these senators, that she did something called the diminished fifth, which is the Fifth Amendment, but it was a diminished form of the Fifth Amendment, which was, ask me anything you want about myself, but don't ask me about my friends. So when my father went before HUAC, the House Un-American Activities Committee, he cut a deal with them. He said, and this is before Lillian Hellman, he said, ask me anything you want about myself, but don't ask me about my wife, and don't ask me about my friends. And of course, they did respect the thing about not asking about his wife, but they asked him about all of his friends. And they interrogated him for a very long time. I think it was about 11 hours. It was on my mother's birthday. And when this horrible experience was over, they were fighting in this restaurant in D.C. about who was going to get a photo op with him, after they had been persecuting him for hours in the House Un-American Activities Committee. Afterwards, they were fighting about who was going to get a photo op to be photographed with John Garfield. Unfortunately, they decided that they weren't happy with his testimony and that they were going to pursue it further, and so they looked for some way, and they found a way that he had accidentally perjured himself. They said he perjured himself. He actually forgot that he had been somewhere at a certain time. And so they resubpoenaed him to appear before the committee.
And they also, I mean, after he was blacklisted, I mean, they were bothering him after that too, correct?
They tapped his phones, and they followed him everywhere that he went. He was going up to see his friend Canada Lee, this great, great African-American actor who worked with my father in Body and Soul. And this FBI agent followed him up to Harlem. And when he got out of the cab, he saw him lurking in a corner. He said, "Hey, how you doing? I'm going up to see Canada Lee. He's dying. You want to come up with me?" So he was summoned to FBI headquarters. And they tried to make a deal with him, knowing that he was being resubpoenaed to appear before HUAC again. My mother had briefly been a member of the Communist Party, and so they showed him her expired Communist Party card. And they said, all you have to do is sign this affidavit saying that your wife was a member of the Communist Party, and we'll clear your name. So in other words, they basically asked him to stool on my mother. So he basically said, starts with an F, ends with a K, U, and he walked out, and that was it.
He was a huge star when he passed away. There were the stories that as many people attended his funerals were Valentino's. I mean, he had so many fans. And yet, I mean, a lot of people do know about John Garfield, a lot of fans still, but it feels like he, should be better recognized, considering how big a star he was, too, and such a great talent. Do you feel that more and more people are coming to him? I mean, I think so.
Well, if it's up to you and Eddie Muller and Alan Brody, maybe that will happen. I hope so. Unfortunately, he was signed with Warner Brothers. He did a lot of B pictures, a lot of pictures that he hated doing. He really wanted to do character work, and he wasn't given a chance because he tried it once in this movie Juarez, and the movie was a big bomb. It didn't work. But if you ever saw him in a movie called Saturday's Children, he did incredible character work. He played this nerd, sort of with glasses, who sort of stumbles all over himself. But he wasn't in enough great films, and that was a problem. But I'm hoping that there is going to be a resurgence of interest in his work.
Yes, there are actors that do really like him. We were talking about Mark Wahlberg. He loves your father, and you think that he should play him in a movie.
He'd be good.
Yeah,
he'd be good. Johnny Depp would be good too.
Yeah,
and it's a great story, and it's a great love story too.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to tell you what Jack Barry said about my father. Jack Barry, who directed He Rambled Away. He said, "This may sound romantic, but I think what happened was, faced with the option of naming names, Julius Garfinkel of the Bronx said to John Garfield of Hollywood, 'You can't do this to me.' And John Garfield packed his bags and died." So, story of a great